If you look at the Maldives on a map, it kind of looks like a handful of tiny pearls sprinkled across the ocean. Beautiful, peaceful, and, well, sort of terrifying if you think too hard about how close the water is to everything. It's a country that's more sea than land. Most of it is barely a meter above the water. One good wave and poof, beach gone. People here joke that they live on floating islands, but sometimes the ocean doesn't seem to get the joke. But let's not get too serious too fast. Picture this. The sun's just waking up, stretching its golden light across the turquoise water. A fisherman's boat drifts by, quiet and slow. The sand is cool under your feet, the kind that makes little squicky sounds when you walk on it. Somewhere, a kid is chasing a crab, and someone else is making breakfast, probably with way too much chili. It's calm. It's soft. It's like the whole world's on snooze mode. That's what the Maldives feels like in the early morning. It's the kind of place where time moves slower, where people actually talk to each other instead of just scrolling, where the ocean has always been more of a friend than an enemy. Generations have lived like this. Fishing, weaving mats, telling stories, raising kids, growing old with the sound of the waves as their background music. But lately, that friend, the ocean, has been acting different, like a buddy who suddenly decides to stand a little too close to your personal space. Each year, the tide creeps in just a bit more. Beaches shrink, trees tilt, and people shake their heads and say, it didn't used to be like this. When you live here, the ocean is your entire world. It feeds you, it carries you, it gives you your best sunsets, but it can also swallow your house if it feels like it. And here's the thing, these islands aren't really built to fight back. You can build a wall or pile up sandbags, but it's a bit like trying to keep a cow out of your kitchen by putting a shoe in front of the door. It's just not going to work forever. The Maldives isn't just some tourist postcard with fancy resorts and overwater villas. It's home, real home. Families have been here for centuries. Women here have grown up with the sea as their backdrop, laughing on the beaches, drying fish on the sand, teaching their kids how to read the weather just by looking at the clouds. It's not just land that's at risk. It's culture, memory, and whole lives. Let's be real. The sea isn't coming tomorrow like some big movie disaster. It's already here, just in slow motion. A little flood here, a beach lost there, a road closed because the tide got too high. It's the kind of thing you almost don't notice at first. But one day you look up and realize the ocean has quietly stolen a big piece of your world. The Maldivian Islands are like little sand castles, strong in their own way, but still at the mercy of the next wave. And these waves aren't waiting around politely. The water level is rising faster now. Scientists have fancy graphs and serious voices when they explain it. But here, people don't need graphs. They can see it. The island gets smaller, the storms get meaner, the nights get wetter, and the people most tied to this land, most tied to these shores, are often the women. They're the ones who keep the home steady when the tide knocks on the door. They're the ones who pack the bags when a family has to move. They're the ones telling the kids, it's fine, we'll be okay, even when they're not sure themselves. Imagine standing on the same patch of sand where your grandmother once stood, but now there's water where her feet used to be. That's what's happening here, slowly, quietly, and there's something cruel about it. The world looks so beautiful from the outside. Tourists snapping pictures of sunsets, sipping coconut water. But for the people who actually live here, it's like watching a slow leak in your roof that no one else seems to care about. If you ask someone here when they first noticed the change, they won't talk about data. They'll talk about the day the well water turned salty, or when their favorite tree fell into the sea, or the year the monsoon came early and didn't leave for weeks. These stories aren't written in reports. They're written in faces. And yet, life goes on. Every morning, the sun still rises over the ocean like it's trying to apologize for what it's about to do. Kids still run down the sand barefoot. People still fix boats, cook food, gossip about neighbors. There's a strange strength in that, a stubbornness maybe, or just hope with really strong legs. Of course, hope doesn't build higher islands, but it keeps people breathing. It keeps them laughing even when the floor is wet again. And maybe, just maybe, it keeps the ocean from winning too fast. It's easy to think of climate change as something happening somewhere far away, like a storm on someone else's horizon. But here, it's already arrived, wearing flip-flops and knocking on every door. This place, this chain of fragile, beautiful islands, has always lived close to the edge. The sea is a neighbor you can't move away from. You just hope it doesn't decide to move in uninvited. And when it does, what can you do? Build a wall? Plant a tree? Whisper to the waves to chill out? People here try everything, but deep down they know you can't fight the ocean forever. Still, as night falls and the wind cools down, the islands don't give up. They settle into the sound of the waves like a lullaby. People breathe in the salty air and hope the land holds a little longer. This story isn't about disaster striking in a single moment. It's about slow change. It's about watching your home shrink, one wave at a time. It's about laughing on the beach today, even if you're not sure it'll still be there tomorrow. And maybe that's what makes the Maldives both magical and heartbreaking. It's a place floating on the edge, a place that shouldn't exist, but somehow does. And for the women here, who build lives, raise families, and hold on to traditions, it's not just land disappearing. It's futures, dreams, and entire histories slowly being washed away. The thing about Maldivian mornings is they're kind of lazy, but in the best way. The sun takes its time climbing up, the sea glimmers like it's posing for Instagram, and people don't really rush anywhere. You hear roosters crowing, kids giggling, boats creaking, and somewhere just behind the coconut trees, you'll find women starting their day. Women here don't just live on these islands, they carry them. Not like superheroes with capes, but in the quiet, everyday kind of way. They're the first ones up and the last ones to rest. The smell of curry usually starts from their kitchens. The fishing nets are checked with their hands. The kids learn the ocean's moods through their stories. If the Maldives were a boat, women would be the anchor, holding it steady.
And it's funny, most tourists come here and only see palm trees, fancy villas, and ocean water that looks like someone added a beauty filter. But if you walk a few steps away from the postcard scene, you find real life. You'll see a group of aunties sitting on woven mats, laughing so loud they could scare a bird mid-flight. Someone will be peeling tuna like a pro. Another will be weaving palm fronds into something magical. And a little girl will be sitting nearby, pretending to help, but mostly just eating snacks. That's the heartbeat of the islands. These women don't wear capes, but they do keep everything moving. Most families in the atolls are close-knit. Everybody knows everybody's business, which can be sweet or mildly annoying depending on the day. If someone drops a pot in one house, 3 neighbors will pop their heads out to check if you broke it, or just your ego. But that closeness, that sense of being one big messy family, is what keeps the island alive. For centuries, women have been the keepers of tradition here. They're the ones who know which wind brings which tide. They can look at the sky and tell if it's going to rain before the radio even tries to guess. They remember old stories, tales about spirits who lived in the lagoons, about fishermen who never returned, and about grandmothers who could predict a storm just by the sound of the waves at night. When they gather in the evenings, their laughter echoes like music. Someone tells a story, someone teases, and someone always tries to give too much food to everyone else. It's not just small talk. It's how knowledge gets passed down. The kids listening around those mats are learning more than they realize. They're learning how to belong. But it's not all sunsets and coconut jokes. Women here have always had to work hard. Fishing might be seen as a man's job sometimes, but behind every boat is a woman fixing nets, salting fish, preparing food, and keeping everything together when the sea decides to be dramatic. And trust me, the sea loves drama. They don't just take care of families, they take care of the island. If there's a flood, it's the women who gather to clean up, patch roofs, and figure out how to make the best of a bad situation. If water gets scarce, they're the ones who line up with buckets, making sure every drop counts. If someone falls sick, it's the aunties who arrive with soup, gossip, and unsolicited advice that somehow always helps. And you know what's kind of beautiful? They make it look easy, like a wave rolling in and out. But it's not easy. Not when the sea keeps creeping closer each year. Not when schools, gardens, and homes slowly lose ground. Yet they keep laughing, keep cooking, keep weaving mats like their grandmothers did. A lot of Maldivian girls grow up with the sound of the ocean as their lullaby. It's the background music to everything. First steps, first heartbreaks, first dreams. They play in the sand, chase hermit crabs, and get scolded for bringing wet feet inside the house. And somewhere along the way, they learn something unspoken. The ocean is part of them. But here's the quiet twist. That same ocean that raised them is now the one threatening their futures. And it's a weird kind of heartbreak. Imagine your best friend slowly turning into something you don't fully trust anymore. That's what a lot of women here feel deep down. Even so, they don't show it on their faces much. There's this cultural strength, a kind of calm stubbornness. When the water floods the yard, someone will probably just shrug, make tea, and joke, well, at least the fish will visit. Humor becomes a shield. Laughter becomes a life raft. It's also why their stories matter so much. Women hold the memories of the islands. They remember when a beach was wide enough for everyone to play football. They remember the exact spot where a certain mango tree grew before the tide took it. And they pass those memories down to their kids, like seashells collected over time. There's one auntie I once heard about. She refuses to move inland, even though the shoreline is practically flirting with her front door now. She just sits on her porch every evening, sipping tea, watching the sunset like it owes her rent. When people ask why she doesn't leave, she smiles and says, I was here before the sea decided to move in. It can wait its turn. That's the kind of spirit you find in Maldivian women. Their strength isn't loud. It's quiet and stubborn. It's woven into their daily routines, into how they raise their kids, into how they keep traditions alive, even when the world outside keeps shifting. And here's the thing. These women don't see themselves as heroes. They'll laugh if you call them that. They'll say they're just living their lives. But in a place where the ocean is slowly erasing the map, living your life is an act of courage. As the day stretches on and the sun gets a little too hot, they gather under the shade, maybe sipping something cold, fanning themselves with old newspapers. Someone will complain about the heat. Someone else will say, this is nothing compared to last year. And somewhere between those conversations, life continues. That's the real Maldives. Not the shiny resorts, not the Instagram sunsets. It's in the hands of women who hold on to their islands like they're holding on to their own beating hearts. There was a time when the people here used to say the sea was their best friend. Not like a human friend, obviously. The ocean doesn't lend you sugar or give relationship advice. But it was a friend in the way it gave life. It fed people, carried boats, cooled the air, and sang lullabies at night. The waves were soft, calm, and reliable. But slowly, quietly, the ocean changed its mood. It didn't happen like in disaster movies with big splashes and screaming people running around. No, it came like a polite guest that slowly starts rearranging your furniture without asking. A little flood here, a new crack in the shore there. Ask anyone who's lived here long enough, and they'll tell you when it began. Not the exact year, maybe, but the feeling. They'll talk about the first time the high tide didn't behave like it was supposed to, like it crept past the line where it was supposed to stop, like a curious cat pushing boundaries. Back then, people laughed it off. The sea's being naughty, someone might say. But the sea wasn't playing. It was warming up. Grandmothers tell stories of how, when they were young, the sea was a friend. You could set your fishing nets out without worrying that the tide would swallow them. The storms were shorter, the beaches wider, and the wind softer. People built their lives with the ocean, not against it. It was a partnership. Now, that partnership is getting complicated. These days, the water seems to arrive with attitude. Sometimes it slips in during the night, leaving puddles in places it never touched before. And sure, it might look funny the first time, but when it happens again and again, the laughter gets quieter. For a lot of Maldivian women, the sea is tied to their memories. Childhood games, late-night talks, stories passed down under starry skies. But now those same places are disappearing. A beach that used to be wide enough for a dozen kids to play football shrinks into a thin strip. Trees that once held hammocks tilt into the water like they're too tired to stand. And when the monsoon winds blow, the ocean doesn't just stay politely outside anymore. It knocks on doors. Sometimes it doesn't even knock. It just walks right in like it owns the place.
People here used to trust the rhythm of the sea. It had rules, patterns, high tide, low tide, calm season, storm season. But now it breaks its own rules, and that makes everything harder. How do you plan your life when the ocean forgets its manners? The women, especially the older ones, notice these changes like they notice wrinkles on their hands, slowly but deeply. They'll point to a spot and say, "We used to sit there after dinner." That same spot might now be under a foot of water. They'll remember how the shoreline used to be 3 steps from the tree, not 1. How the sound of the waves used to be far away at night, not tapping on their door like an impatient guest. Some people try to fight it in their own way. They pile up sandbags, they build little walls, they plant trees that can hold the soil. But the ocean doesn't care about walls or trees. It's patient. It just keeps coming, wave after wave, year after year. And it's not just water on land. It's what it does to the heart. Imagine watching your favorite corner of the world, your childhood, your family memories, slowly sink. You don't get a loud alarm or a dramatic headline. You get silence. You get water inching forward like it has nowhere else to go. There's an old man on one atoll who says the sea is like an old friend who forgot your birthday for too many years. Still familiar, still beautiful, but not quite the same. And you can't unsee that. What makes it even harder is that to outsiders, the Maldives still looks perfect. Tourists arrive, snap photos of turquoise water and say, "Wow, what a paradise." And they're right, on the surface. But beneath that perfect blue, the islands are shrinking. And who notices it most? The people who live closest to the shore, the women who fetch water, who sweep the sand, who plant the little gardens in their yards. They're the ones who watch the tide every day, who can feel the difference, even if nobody writes it down. When the waves get rough, they know what to do. They've been through storms before, but storms used to leave. This creeping sea doesn't leave. It just stays a little longer each year. Some nights, when the wind is calm and the stars are sharp, you can hear the sea breathing. It's a sound Maldivian kids grow up with. It's supposed to be comforting, but for some families now, it's also a reminder, like the ticking of a clock you can't turn off. And yet, even with all this change, people don't give up on the ocean. How can they? It's home. You can't stop loving the place where you learn to walk. You just start living differently. You keep your sandals by the door. You keep an extra bucket handy. You learn to laugh even when the water is ankle deep in your yard. Some women even name the floods. They give them nicknames like mischievous kids. "Oh, here comes little wave again," they'll say, rolling their eyes as they sweep water out of the porch. It's humor as armor. If you can laugh at the tide, at least you're not letting it win entirely. This slow drowning isn't loud. It's quiet. But the quiet can be heavy. The sound of one more wave landing where it shouldn't. One more crack in the earth. one more story swallowed by the sea. Still, every morning, people get up, women sweep the sand, kids chase crabs, someone stirs a pot of curry like nothing's changed. Maybe because holding on to normal is its own kind of strength. The sea may be a different friend now, but it's still that friend. And for now, the island breathes, even if the water breathes closer. There's something special about growing up on an island. For a Maldivian child, the sea isn't some vacation spot or postcard background. It's the playground, the babysitter, the alarm clock, and sometimes the scolding teacher. Kids here learn to walk on sand, not pavement. They learn to read the sea before they can spell their names. Every childhood here starts with salty air and wet feet. The kind of wet feet that never really dry because someone's always running into the water when they're not supposed to. Mornings are full of barefoot races on the beach, climbing coconut trees they shouldn't be climbing, and chasing after crabs like they're sworn enemies. If you ask an older woman about her childhood, she'll probably laugh and point to a spot that's no longer there. She'll say something like, "We used to play right there." And you'll look, but now there's just water. What used to be the neighborhood playground has turned into part of the lagoon. But for kids, it doesn't hit right away. They don't sit around thinking about climate change. They just notice that their play area is a little smaller each year. The ball rolls into the water faster than before. The line where they used to draw their games disappears a bit earlier every evening. And still, they play, because that's what kids do. But if you stand on the porch of an old house early in the morning, you'll see the difference. Where there used to be dry sand for playing tag, now the tide creeps in like a sleepy guest. Some mothers quietly shake their heads, remembering when their own feet ran across a much wider beach. When the monsoon rains come, kids love it at first. They splash in puddles, yell at the sky, pretend they're adventurers exploring a wild lagoon. But when the water doesn't leave after a few hours, or even a few days, the adventure starts to feel less fun. The puddle becomes a pool, the pool becomes a pond, and the pond becomes a reminder that their little world is shrinking. Schools feel it too. Many island schools sit close to the shoreline. Kids used to play football on sandy fields, but now some of those fields are soft and muddy all year round. Sometimes, when the tide gets high, the goalposts look like they're standing in the middle of a lake. No one calls off the game, though. They just play barefoot, laughing and slipping, like the ocean joined the match. Some parents worry quietly. They don't say much, but they notice the water inching closer to the classrooms, the road, the house. They wonder how long it'll take before the sea wins another round. For little girls especially, the sea has always been part of their everyday rituals. They help sweep the sand out of the house after the tide has played its tricks again. They listen to their mothers talk about the way the island used to be. They braid each other's hair while sitting on steps that might one day be underwater. And even though they're young, they learn early that nothing here ever truly stays the same. One girl once said to her grandmother, "The ocean is growing." And the grandmother just nodded, because what else can you say? It is growing. Not like a monster in a fairy tale, but slowly, patiently, wave after wave. And yet, despite the slow loss, the sound of laughter never disappears entirely. Kids build sand castles right next to the water as if daring the tide to knock them down. And of course, the tide always does. But the next day, they build again. There's something poetic about that, like hope with tiny hands and sandy knees. Some families try to protect what's left. They pile rocks at the edge of the beach, hoping to hold back the waves. Some even plant little mangrove trees to keep the sand from slipping away. Kids watch their parents do this, not fully understanding why, but sensing that it matters. There's a quiet lesson being passed down without words. You don't give up on your home, even when the sea tries to steal it.
But still,
The shrinking land isn't something that can be ignored forever. Every year, one more childhood spot disappears. A swing gets taken down because the tree is too close to the edge now. A little house gets moved back, closer to the center of the island. The coconut tree everyone used to climb leans a little further out over the water, like it's thinking of leaving too. And in the background, life goes on. The ocean still glimmers under the sun, like it's innocent. Tourists still snap photos of the water as if it's not swallowing pieces of childhood with every wave. Kids still laugh, but the grown-ups hear something else in that laughter, an echo of what used to be. A woman named Mariam once told me she used to play tag with her sisters on a sandbar that's now completely underwater. It was our world, she said. We thought it would always be there, but the sea wanted it back. She laughed after saying it, but the kind of laugh that sits on the edge between funny and sad. That's the thing here. The ocean never shouts. It whispers. It takes little pieces at a time, and by the time you realize how much is gone, it's already too late to shout back. But the kids keep playing, because what else can they do? It's their home. They build new sandcastles a little further back. They chase crabs a little closer to the houses, and when the tide comes again, they'll move back again, like their mothers did, like their grandmothers did. Somewhere in those small steps backward, you can feel a whole nation learning how to live on the edge of a moving shoreline. When the sun sets in the Maldives, everything slows down. The air gets heavy, the sky turns soft pink, and the ocean starts to look less like a playground and more like a quiet warning. And in this stillness, Maldivian women step into their evening routines. They sweep, they cook, they sit with their children, they fix nets or wash sand off their feet. It looks peaceful. It is peaceful. But under all that calm, they're carrying worries that don't always have names. Worries that come with living on land that keeps shrinking. For generations, Maldivian women have held their families together like threads in a fishing net. When the men go out to sea, someone has to keep the home steady. Someone has to raise the kids, grow the food, watch the tides, and notice the quiet changes nobody else pays attention to. They see the ocean not as a postcard, but as a neighbor that sometimes brings gifts and sometimes knocks your fence down without asking. Take Mariam, for example. She's 42, a mother of 4, and she's lived on the same island her whole life. She can tell when the tide is coming just by how the wind smells. She knows when the sand is shifting under the house floor. She knows when a wall is holding strong or when it's about to give up. And she remembers. Oh, she remembers. When I was young, she says, the beach was wide. We played here. My kids don't have that space. The sea took it, slowly, like it's nibbling. It's not just land being lost, it's stability. For women like her, the ocean has changed from being part of everyday life to being something you must constantly prepare for. The kitchen floor floods once, you dry it. Twice, you sigh. The third time, you start to worry about where the bed will go next. Some nights, the water creeps in so quietly, you can hear it licking the walls before you even wake up. Women like Mariam don't panic anymore. They move. They lift their things. They adjust. Because in a place where the sea is the uninvited guest, you learn to adapt fast. But adaptation comes at a cost. When the ocean eats land, it doesn't send an apology note. It just takes. And the women are left to figure out where to wash the clothes now that the well is salty, where to hang the laundry when the backyard's underwater, where to build the kitchen when the sand has disappeared. And then there's food. It's easy to imagine that an island surrounded by water must have endless food. Fish, coconuts, sunshine. Paradise, right? But when salt water creeps into the soil, it poisons what people grow.
The little vegetable patches women have cared for don't survive long when the roots taste the sea. I used to grow chilies, another woman says. Now I buy them. I never bought chilies before. The sea made me buy chilies. She laughs, but it's the tired kind of laugh. Water is supposed to be life, but here, it's also a thief. In many Maldivian homes, women are the ones who handle water. Not the ocean water, of course. That one handles itself. But the water for drinking, washing, cooking. When salt pushes into wells, when rain barrels don't fill enough, it's the women who carry buckets from faraway collection points. It's the women who figure out how to make a little last a long time. And when schools close because of flooding, it's the women who keep the children safe. When the roads flood, they figure out how to get food, how to make sure nobody falls sick. These quiet responsibilities rarely make it into reports or news headlines. They're not dramatic. They don't involve helicopters or sirens. Just a woman lifting her skirt to walk through ankle-deep water with a bucket in her hand, pretending it's all fine. But behind that calm is resilience, the kind that isn't loud, but builds entire lives. Many women here say they feel like they're fighting a slow, invisible enemy. Not a war, not a storm, just this steady rising of water that changes everything without warning. And the world notices, but not really. Tourists still come and sip coconuts by the lagoon, posting pictures of heaven on earth. Meanwhile, Mariam is mopping her floor for the third time this week. Yet, here's the thing. They don't give up. They find ways. Small ways. Quiet ways. They build little barriers. They learn when to move their things. They share water when someone's well goes salty. They lean on each other, because that's what they've always done. When the island gets smaller, the community gets tighter. But that tightness also means the pressure on women grows heavier. They're expected to keep things steady, to keep hope alive, even when they're the ones feeling it slip away. There's this unspoken rule in many Maldivian homes. Don't scare the children. So they smile. They keep cooking. They make jokes about fish swimming through the kitchen. And then, when night comes, they sit quietly and stare at the dark water, wondering how many more tides their homes can take. Climate change sounds like this big, complicated, scientific thing, but for Maldivian women, it's not a theory. It's the reason their chili plants died. It's the reason their daughter has to wade through water to get to school. It's the reason their kitchen smells like the ocean. And still, they keep going. Because what else can they do? The ocean doesn't wait for anyone, but neither do they. Mornings in the Maldives look like paradise, the kind of paradise travel agencies love to print on glossy brochures. Calm turquoise water, sky like a watercolor painting, and women sweeping their doorsteps while the world wakes up slow. But if you listen a little closer, beneath the songs of birds and the whispers of waves, you'll hear something else, the sound of change. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like the tide. For generations, families here have built their lives around the ocean's moods. Houses aren't just placed randomly, they're positioned with the water in mind. Kitchens are raised a little higher. Walls are built with what's available. Coral stones once, now cement. But no matter how strong the wall, the water finds its way in eventually.
Every year, that gentle turquoise water creeps closer to doorsteps. At first, it just wets your feet. Then it soaks the floor mats. Now, in some homes, it's a regular guest that doesn't bother knocking. Heba remembers when her house used to be 6 good steps away from the high tide. She knows because, as a little girl, she'd jump each step like it was a game. Now, the sea is 1 step away. The game is over, and the ocean won. It doesn't rush, she says. It just moves, like it's breathing. And one day, you wake up, and the sand is gone. People talk about climate change like a storm,
But here, it's more like someone slowly stealing your house piece by piece while smiling politely. The funny thing is, no one really panics at first. It happens too slowly. At first, the sea just flirts with your doorstep. You sweep it out, like a rude guest who tracked in sand. Then it visits again, and again. After a few years, it moves in full time. Some families try to fight it. They stack rocks, build barriers, add sandbags. But sandbags don't scare the ocean. The water just laughs, rolls over, and comes in anyway. Others have started moving further inland, but inland on an island isn't exactly far. When your whole island is smaller than a shopping mall, there's only so much in to move. Women especially feel these moves the hardest. Home is their base, their anchor. When the home shifts, everything shifts. And it's not just the sea sneaking up on their houses. The ground itself is changing. Salt water is seeping into the soil, turning once soft earth into something stubborn and unfriendly. Wells taste like brine. Gardens dry out even when it rains. Some nights when the moon is full, the high tide pushes even further. The water slithers into kitchens and bedrooms like it owns the place. You'd think it would be terrifying, but most people here don't scream. They've seen it before. They just sigh, lift their things onto chairs, and wait. Heba tells me her daughter learned to sleep through the sound of water splashing against the door. She calls it the sea knocking. Heba laughs, but it's a quiet laugh, the kind that hides a worry underneath. You see, when your house floods a little every few weeks, it's not just water. It's stress. It's rust. It's ruined mats and swollen doors. It's your grandmother's wooden chest smelling like the ocean. And slowly, quietly, people begin to think about leaving. Not because they want to, but because the island they love is changing faster than they can fix it. Leaving, though, isn't simple. Where do you go when your whole country is made of islands? When home isn't just walls and a roof, but a stretch of sand where your family has lived for generations? For many Maldivian women, the thought of relocation feels like being asked to tear out their own roots. "My mother is buried here," she whispers. "If we go, who will visit her? Who will bring flowers? The sea?" It's not just about survival. It's about belonging. There are plans, of course, government programs, relocation ideas, seawalls, big words on big documents. But those plans don't help much when your floor is wet right now, when your daughter's shoes float by the front door like little boats. And here's the thing, moving doesn't guarantee safety. Other islands are shrinking too. And even if they go to the capital, Male, it's crowded, expensive, and loud. It doesn't feel like home. So many stay, not because they don't see the water, but because they love the sand more. And in their staying, there's something stubborn and beautiful, a kind of quiet resistance. When the sea rises, they build a small step. When it rises again, they build another. It's not a perfect plan, but it's theirs. Children learn to walk on slightly raised floors. Grandmothers keep their prayer mats on higher shelves. Women cook with one eye on the tide. Life reshapes itself, like water flowing into a new container. Every islander knows that one day, maybe not tomorrow, but someday, the water will win. But until then, the island is theirs. When the day ends in the Maldives, it's not just the sun that sets. It's the noise, too. Boats slow down, the school's empty, and the air gets thick and quiet. And in that quiet, people start to talk about the things they don't always say out loud during the day. If you sit near a group of women in the evening, you'll hear a lot of laughter, yes, but also whispers about the future. Not the fancy kind of 10-year plan talk. More like, will this house last through the next flood?
Or should we move before the next big tide? Because in a place where the ocean decides the rules, the future isn't planned with pen and paper. It's planned with buckets, bricks, and quiet prayers. The most complicated conversations are happening around kitchen tables. That's where decisions are made, not in government buildings. When to reinforce a wall, when to pack valuables, when to send a child to stay with relatives in another island. Women are at the heart of these talks, not because they want to be, but because they have to be. When the home shakes, it's the women who hold it steady. And lately, there's a new kind of question slipping into these talks. What happens if we can't stay? Leaving isn't just about getting on a boat. It means leaving graves, coconut trees, first loves, and the spot where your grandmother used to sit and tell stories. It means leaving behind the sound of the sea you've known your whole life. Mariam says she's not afraid of the water. She's afraid of forgetting. If I leave this island, she says softly, who will remember the stories buried in the sand? These stories are heavy. They're not written in books. They're carried in songs, in recipes, in the way someone ties a fishing net. When the sea takes the land, it doesn't just wash away houses. It washes away the little things that make a place a home. And here's the thing most outsiders don't get. Moving isn't just about survival. It's about identity. For many Maldivian women, their identity is tied to the land they sweep every morning, the path they walk barefoot, the smell of wet sand after the rain. When that's gone, who are they? Some families have already moved. There's always that one neighbor who used to live next door and now lives on another island. At first, people say, we'll visit, but visits get fewer. The ties thin. And slowly, like the tide, the sense of belonging starts to shift too. Those who leave say life is different in Malé or in other islands. There's more noise, more people, but less sky, less ocean. Ironically, being further from the rising sea doesn't always feel safer. Sometimes it just feels lonelier. Those who stay behind build routines around uncertainty. They know the next big wave might come at night. They know the sand is slipping away. But they also know the ocean has always been both friend and foe, and they've lived with it their whole lives.
Heba once joked, if the sea wants to take my house, it should at least pay rent first. Everyone laughed, but underneath that laugh was a shared understanding. The sea doesn't pay rent, it just takes. Still, even in these quiet nighttime conversations, there's not just fear, there's also a stubborn kind of hope. Mothers tell their daughters, we'll be okay. Grandmothers say, the island will take care of us. They're not naive. They're holding on to something deeper, the belief that identity doesn't wash away as easily as sand. But they also know that hope alone doesn't hold walls together. So every family has its little plan. Some keep bags packed, just in case. Others stack sandbags, build tiny barriers, or raise their floors. It's like living in a house that slowly turns into a boat. The government talks about relocation, seawalls, and adaptation plans. But late at night, what matters isn't a policy. It's whether you can keep your children dry when the tide comes. These are not dramatic disaster scenes. No helicopters, no breaking news. Just a woman lifting a plastic chair out of ankle-deep water while her daughter does her homework at the table. It's the quiet kind of crisis. The one that happens in slippers, not sirens. But in that quiet, there's also strength. These women have learned to live with uncertainty without letting it swallow them whole. They still make jokes, they still sing lullabies to their children, they still watch the moon reflect on the water and call it beautiful, even if that same water might be inside their house tomorrow. They're not just victims of climate change. They are the keepers of memory, the defenders of home, the stubborn hearts of islands that refuse to vanish quietly. If you live on an island long enough, you stop checking the weather app. You just look at the sky. You feel the wind. You smell the air. The sea has its own language, and Maldivian women know it better than anyone. When the tide turns restless, they notice before anyone else. The way the breeze shifts, the way the ground under the house feels damp before a single drop of rain falls. It's not magic, it's experience. The sea doesn't always roar like in disaster movies. Sometimes it just creeps, slow, steady, like a quiet guest who forgot how to leave. The signs are everywhere. A bucket left outside fills faster than usual. The water line on a wall climbs 1 inch higher than last time. The road that was dry yesterday becomes a shallow stream overnight. And then the whispers start. The water's rising again. Not shouted, just said like a neighbor saying hello, because by now, everyone expects it. Some days, it's a light flood, just enough to wet the floor, make kids giggle as they splash around. Other days, it's more serious. Furniture is moved, doors are shut tight, and everyone's routine changes without needing to be told. The ocean has its own schedule, and nobody on the island gets to ignore it. For women, these small floods aren't just inconveniences. They're a quiet battle. It means drying mats, scrubbing floors again, washing clothes again, moving everything one more time. It means checking if the well water is still drinkable or if it tastes like the ocean now. Heba says she can tell how bad the flood will be just by how the floor smells. She says, "It's like the sea sends me a message through the tiles." She laughs, but there's truth in that laugh. These women don't need forecasts. Their homes are the forecast. Tourists don't see this part. They stay in their overwater villas with infinity pools and perfect views. They take photos of sunsets, while just a few islands away, someone is lifting their bed frame to keep it dry. The floodwater doesn't care about timing. It comes during cooking time, prayer time, even bedtime. And the women adjust, because what else can they do? Some of them have gotten creative. They build little steps out of bricks. They make makeshift walkways from wooden planks. They raise everything important just a few inches higher. It's not perfect, but it works, at least for now. It's not just the houses. The whole rhythm of the island changes with the water. Children go to school barefoot when the roads are wet. People do their errands earlier in the day before the tide gets too high. Shops keep sandbags near the doors, like it's just another piece of furniture. For outsiders, it looks like chaos, but for islanders, it's routine. And then there's the rain. Tropical rain doesn't fall softly, it crashes. 1 minute the sky is blue, the next it's like someone flipped a switch and decided to wash the whole island. The rain doesn't stay polite either. It mixes with the rising tide, and suddenly the whole island feels smaller. Miriam says she doesn't mind the rain. She says it's the rain and the sea together that make trouble, like two friends who get rowdy when they meet. And that's the thing. One flood on its own might be manageable, but when the tide and the rain team up, everything changes. The island becomes a shallow bowl, filling faster than anyone can bail it out. Women keep buckets ready, not just for collecting water, but for pushing it back out. They know which corners of the house flood first. They know how fast they have to work. There's no emergency siren, no official countdown, just instincts and experience passed down like recipes. Some might think these are just small inconveniences, but it's the small things that wear people down the most. It's not a giant storm that forces someone to move. It's years of wet feet, soaked floors, ruined gardens, salty water, and tired hands. And yet, even during the worst floods, you'll hear laughter. Someone will make a joke about floating away with the furniture. A child will pretend a bucket is a boat. A grandmother will sit on her raised chair, shake her head, and say, "This sea is cheeky today." Humor is how they survive the creeping water, not because it's funny, but because it's the only thing the tide can't wash away. But beneath the laughter, everyone knows the truth. The floods are coming faster now. The water is higher, the steps they built last year aren't enough anymore, and someday soon, a bucket won't fix what the sea takes. Still, they face each flood like they always have, together. No heroics, no grand speeches, just hands, brooms, and quiet determination. Every community on these islands is like a big, extended family. Everyone knows everyone. Everyone has sat on someone's front step, borrowed sugar from someone's kitchen, or shared gossip about whose chicken got lost this time. This closeness isn't just sweet, it's survival. Because when the sea rises, it's not just one house that floods, it's the whole neighborhood. And when the water comes, no one stands alone. Miriam says the first thing that happens when the floodwaters creep in isn't panic, it's knocking on doors. Someone yells, "Water's coming!" And suddenly everyone's outside, lifting things, blocking doorways, helping the older neighbors who can't move fast anymore. There are no big alarms, no emergency drills, just hands, lots of hands. The women, especially, are like quiet generals in this flood routine. They know where the sandbags are stored, which house needs help first, and who to call when the tide's a little higher than usual. It's teamwork, but not the shiny kind. It's barefoot, soaked, tired teamwork. The kind that builds trust without needing words. When a family's house gets hit harder than the rest, someone else brings food. Someone else lends a bed for the night. Kids end up sleeping 3 or 4 at a mattress, giggling even as their parents worry quietly in the next room.
We take turns being the strong one, Hiba tells me. When my house floods, my neighbor helps. When hers floods, I help. That's how it works. It's not charity, it's community. But rising seas are testing that bond in ways it hasn't been tested before. In the old days, floods came once in a while. Now, it feels like every other week. People are tired. You can hear it in the way they laugh a little less, sigh a little more. Some families who used to help now need help themselves. Some who once had dry homes are now knee-deep in water. And slowly, everyone starts to feel the weight. Still, no one dares give up on each other, because here, the community is the safety net. There's something powerful about the way women organize when things go wrong. It's not loud, there's no shouting, just quiet instructions, buckets passing hand to hand, children being lifted to higher ground, food being shared without asking. Sometimes the men are out fishing when the flood hits, and the women take charge without a second thought. It's not even seen as special. It's just how things have always been. One night, after a big flood, Mariam told me about how she and her neighbors formed a kind of bucket brigade. She laughed as she described how they lined up, tossing water out of her house like a team in a comedy movie. We looked like we were dancing, she said, but the floor was finally dry by midnight. Behind that laugh was exhaustion, of course, but also pride. Because when the sea knocks, they answered together. And it's not just about water. When the well turns salty, they share rainwater. When someone's garden dies, they share food. When a child's uniform gets soaked and ruined, someone else's spare shirt shows up like magic. The rising tide might take away sand, homes, gardens, but it hasn't managed to wash away the bond between people. Not yet. Still, everyone knows that this invisible rope tying them together is being pulled tighter. More strain, more pressure, less space to breathe. And the question nobody says out loud hangs in the humid air.
What happens when the water gets too high for everyone? Will they be forced to scatter? To leave the island one family at a time? And if that happens, will the community survive the distance? Hiba once said, "Even if I live on another island, my heart will still be here." Then she paused like someone who's not sure whether that's comforting or sad. Right now, though, they're still here, still building walls together, still carrying buckets together, still laughing together, even if sometimes the laughter is more out of stubbornness than joy. The strength of these communities isn't built in boardrooms or on fancy plans. It's built in wet slippers, shared rice, and hands that don't hesitate. The sea might be strong, but it's not the only force here. There's another kind, quiet, human, fierce in its own way. If you ask the women here what scares them most about the rising sea, many won't say the water itself. They'll say the land, or rather, the disappearing land. For most of us, land is something solid, a given. You build your house on it, plant a garden, draw chalk lines for your kids to play. But here, land is more like a guest on borrowed time. Each high tide, each storm, each creeping wave takes a little piece away. Not all at once, just one handful at a time. Hiba remembers the coconut tree that stood in front of her childhood home. It was tall, strong, a proper landmark. Everyone in the village knew that tree. Kids played under it. It gave shade like an old kind auntie. Now, it's gone, swallowed by the sea. It didn't happen dramatically. One year, the roots were visible. The next, the sand around it washed away. Then one morning, it tilted like it was bowing out of the story. And just like that, the waves claimed it. Losing that tree wasn't just losing a plant. It was losing part of a memory, a piece of home. It happens slowly, then suddenly. A piece of the shore collapses overnight. A path people have walked their whole lives turns to mush. A house that felt safe suddenly sits too close to the water. When you grow up on a tiny island, even a few meters of sand matter. It's the difference between having space to play or having nowhere to run. The government sometimes sends teams to pile sandbags or build little seawalls, and for a while, it works. The waves bounce back. People breathe easier. But the sea, well, the sea doesn't care about sandbags. It comes back stronger, quieter, more patient. And bit by bit, it eats away at the edges again. Mariam says, the sea is like a naughty child. You tell it to stay put and it laughs and does the opposite. She says it with a grin, but there's a sadness hiding underneath. Because no matter how many walls they build, the ocean is winning. It's not just beaches they're losing. They're losing fields, gardens, graves, even the little patches of land where kids learn to ride bikes or where families gather after dinner. One corner of the island used to have a row of houses. Now, only 3 remain. The others were abandoned when the foundations started sinking. Some are already gone, the sea washing over the places where laughter once echoed. Walking along those edges feels strange. You see half-buried walls, broken steps leading to nowhere, coconut stumps sticking out in the surf like bones of a memory. But the hardest part isn't just what the sea takes. It's what it makes people feel. That quiet, helpless sense that the ground beneath their feet is no longer theirs. Imagine growing up knowing each of your island. Every corner has a story. And then, one by one, those corners disappear. First the tree, then the field, then maybe the street. And with each loss, something else slips away. Security. For women, this isn't just land. It's their anchor. Their gardens feed their families. Their yards are their playgrounds. Their homes are their worlds. Losing land means losing control over their lives, even in the smallest ways. Hiba says she used to plant flowers near her front step. Now the soil is too salty. The flowers died,
but the seaweed grows just fine. She laughs, but her eyes don't. Some people have already moved inland, though inland here might only mean a few hundred meters. Others talk about leaving altogether, but that's a conversation nobody wants to have too loudly. Because leaving the island isn't just packing a bag. It's leaving behind graves, gardens, memories, and the piece of ocean that shaped them. And so, for now, they stay. They build walls a little higher, they pile sand a little thicker. They tell the sea, not today. But deep down, everyone knows the sea isn't asking, it's deciding. The shoreline that used to feel permanent is now a living, moving thing. Some mornings, the women stand there with their hands on their hips, staring at the tide like it's an enemy they've known all their lives. It's a quiet war. No soldiers, no noise, just water and time. And every grain of sand lost is another reminder that this war isn't fair. Still, they don't turn away. They keep planting, even if the soil is stubborn. They keep rebuilding, even if the walls don't last. They keep living, even as the land disappears inch by inch.
But when the sea keeps creeping closer, home slowly turns into something fragile, something that can be taken. Mariam grew up in a house her grandfather built. It's painted pale blue with a little porch shaded by palms. Every crack in the wall tells a story. A storm survived, a season passed, a life built over time. But last year, during a particularly high tide, the water reached the porch. The next month, it entered the kitchen. Now, every time it rains hard, the family moves everything up onto bricks. It's like living with an uninvited guest, she says. The sea just walks in whenever it wants. She tries to say it lightly, but her hands fidget as she speaks. The house isn't just wood and cement. It's her parents' laughter, her childhood maps, the smell of fried fish on sleepy afternoons. And watching the sea nibble at it piece by piece feels like losing a heartbeat in slow motion. Heba's story isn't much different. She remembers when her family's garden stretched far behind the house. They had bananas, breadfruit, and hibiscus flowers blooming in every corner. Now half that garden is gone. The water came one stormy night and didn't leave. She didn't cry then. She says she just stood there, staring at the muddy, broken trees. "I felt like the ground had betrayed me," she whispers. Losing a home here doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens in quiet inches. A wall starts to crack. The ground gets soft. Water seeps under the door. Furniture gets moved higher. Until one day, the family looks around and realizes they're not living in the same home anymore. Sometimes families rebuild on the same spot, stubborn like the palm trees that refuse to fall. They raise the floor, add new walls, seal everything tighter, and for a little while, it feels safe again. But the sea always finds a way in. Others decide to move inland if they can. But inland is a funny word here. On a tiny island, moving inland might just mean 50 meters. And even that isn't always safe for long. And then there are the ones who have to leave entirely. Not because they want to, but because their homes have become too wet, too weak, too unstable to stay. The hardest part isn't the packing, it's the looking back. The final glance at a doorway that held generations. The thought that the house you grew up in will soon be underwater. Some people take pieces of their home with them. A cracked wooden chair, a piece of the porch railing, a photo taken in front of a tree that no longer exists. Tiny relics of something bigger than wood and nails. Mariam once told me, "If I ever have to leave, I'll take a jar of sand, just so I can still touch home." The thing about losing a home to the sea is that it doesn't just take the building. It takes the certainty that the ground beneath your feet is yours. It replaces it with questions. Where will I go? Who will I be there? Will it still feel like home if it's not this island? For women, that fear runs deep. They're the ones who keep the house breathing, who cook, clean, raise children, store stories in every corner. When the house goes, part of their identity goes with it. But even in that fear, there's stubborn hope. Heba still sweeps the porch every morning. Mariam still paints over cracks. They act like the house is permanent, even if the sea has other plans. It's not just a house, Heba says. It's proof we lived here. Maybe that's why so many stay as long as they can. Because letting go of a house here isn't just leaving a building. It's letting go of roots. And nobody wants to do that unless they have no other choice. If there's one thing you'll notice on these islands, it's how the women make things work. No matter how stubborn the sea gets, they find ways to bend, twist, adjust, and keep life moving. Heba likes to say, we can't fight the ocean, but we can make it wait. It's not about fancy technology or big engineering. It's small, smart acts of resistance. Everyday genius. Take the Flores, for example. When water started creeping into people's homes, the women didn't just complain. They lifted the furniture with leftover bricks. They built low wooden stands so shoes wouldn't float away. They learned how to seal doors with rolled-up mats and plastic sheets. And when the floods became too regular, they didn't panic. They adapted their routines. Laundry got done earlier in the day before the tide rose. Cooking shifted to higher counters. Kids were taught to grab what matters first when water comes in, not out of fear, but out of habit. Mariam even built a little water shelf in her kitchen. It holds matches, salt, medicine, and a small radio. She jokes that it's her flood survival corner, but it's not really a joke. It's practical wisdom born out of living with a restless ocean. And then there's the rainwater collection. When the wells turn salty, these women set out buckets, tanks, even old plastic barrels to catch every drop of rain. It's like a dance. Roof gutters angled just right, buckets lined in rows, cloth filters tied over the tops. It's not fancy, but it works. And gardens? You'd think salt water would have wiped them out, but no. The women got clever. Some started growing herbs and veggies in raised wooden boxes, away from the wet ground. Others use old plastic containers filled with imported soil, guarded like treasure. Heba grows mint and chilies this way. Even if the sea takes my land, she says with a grin, it won't take my spice. This quiet innovation isn't new. It's been passed down through generations. Women here have always had to adjust to the moods of the sea. Storms, tides, heat, wind. But now, with the water rising faster, their skills have become more than tradition. They're survival strategies. There's also this thing about timing. The islanders move with the rhythm of the tide. Some families have a flood clock, not a real clock, but a mental schedule. They know when the water is likely to creep in, when it's safe to work, and when to get out of the way. It's like living with a roommate you didn't choose. You can't make them leave, so you learn how to live around them. Of course, not every solution is perfect. Sandbags break, wood rots, plastic tears. Some days the water went. But the point isn't that they stop the sea entirely. It's that they don't give up trying. One evening, I sat with Mariam and a group of women as they patched up an old canoe to use as a makeshift ferry between the flooded parts of the village. They laughed the whole time, teasing each other about who would be the worst paddler. It didn't look like a climate adaptation project. It looked like a group of women refusing to let the ocean boss them around.
That humor, the lightness, is part of their resilience. Because when your house floods every few weeks, you either find ways to laugh or you drown in worry. Heba told me something that stuck. We don't have the luxury to give up. If the sea comes, we move the chairs. If it comes again, we move ourselves. But we don't stop living. And that's what makes these women incredible. They're not waiting for someone to save them. They're saving themselves. One clever hack, one raised floor, one rain bucket at a time.
But there's a quiet truth under all that resourcefulness. No matter how clever they are, their solutions are temporary. The ocean isn't stopping, it's only slowing down when they fight back. Still, every morning, they sweep the porches, they fix the cracks, they tighten the ropes on the rain buckets, and they smile like people who know they've outsmarted the tide one more day. When people talk about climate change, they love big words: adaptation, resilience, mitigation. But here, those aren't just fancy terms. Here, they're lived every single day, and no one carries that weight more quietly or more constantly than the women. They're the first to feel the flood under their feet, the first to hear the wind shift, the first to notice when the water in the well tastes just a little saltier. Heba says, "The sea tells us things before it tells the men." She laughs after saying it, but there's truth hiding behind that grin. Because for generations, women here have been the keepers of small details, the ones who track the seasons through smell, the tides through sound, the storms through feeling. When a big tide is coming, it's not the weather alerts on a screen that warn people. It's a woman saying, "The air is too still tonight." And that's enough for the village to get ready. This kind of knowledge doesn't come from books. It comes from barefoot mornings, long nights, and years of living in rhythm with the ocean. It's passed down like a secret, mother to daughter, neighbor to neighbor, story to story. Maryam remembers how her grandmother used to wake up before dawn, walk outside, and stand facing the sea. No radio, no thermometer, no internet, just the wind on her face. She'd turn around and say, "The tide will be bad today." And she was almost always right. That kind of wisdom still lives here. It's quieter now, buried under the noise of modernization, but it's there, like the steady pulse of the island itself. When the floods come, it's often the women who lead, without ever calling it leadership. They decide which house needs sandbags first, who checks on the elders, who keeps the children together. It's not a command, it's a choreography. Everyone knows their steps. Even in everyday life, their work shapes how the community stands against the rising sea. They decide when the washing is done, how the water is stored, which gardens get saved. These might sound like small things, but they're the quiet pillars holding the island up. Heba once said, "We don't wear capes, we wear wet slippers." She grinned as the women around her burst into laughter, but the thing is, she's not wrong. These women may not be on the news, they may not give speeches at fancy climate summits, but they're doing the work. They're adapting every single day. But this quiet strength doesn't come without cost. It's heavy. Some days they're tired, not just from the chores and the endless mopping of floors, but from the weight of pretending they're fine. One night, Maryam sat by the shore and whispered, "Sometimes I wish the sea would just give us a break." Not in anger, just a tired kind of wish. Their strength doesn't mean they don't feel fear. It just means they've learned to live with it, like living with the sound of the waves. What makes their role even more important is how invisible it often is. Outsiders visit the islands and see blue water, palm trees, smiles. They don't see the quiet hands that keep everything running when the sea comes too close. No one writes headlines about the woman who fixes the broken wall before the next tide, or the grandmother who teaches a child how to read the wind. But without them, this fight would already be lost. And it's not just about practical skills. It's emotional strength, too. When the children get scared during floods, it's their mothers, grandmothers, aunts who hold them close and say, "We've done this before. We'll do it again." That sentence alone, simple, soft, steady, holds up more of the island than any wall of sandbags. Still, everyone knows things are changing. The tides are higher, the walls are weaker, the weight on women's shoulders is heavier. But for now, they keep going. Not because they think the sea will stop, but because this is their home. And as long as they're here, they'll keep standing between their families and the water. There's a word the women here don't say often, but it sits quietly in the corners of every conversation. Leaving. Nobody wants to leave the island. It's not just land to them. It's identity, memory, family. It's where their ancestors fished, cooked, sang, argued, lived, and were buried. But as the tides rise higher and the ground slips away, the idea of leaving has started to sneak into their lives, like the sea itself. Heba remembers the first time she heard a neighbor say it. She was 12. The woman had just finished sweeping a floor that flooded again. She leaned on her broom and sighed, "Maybe one day we'll have to go." Back then it sounded strange, almost like a joke. Nobody actually left the island. But now, more people say it out loud. Not like a dream, like a possibility. Some families have already gone. They moved to bigger islands or to the capital, Malé. A few are lucky enough to get help from relatives who live in other countries. But leaving isn't simple. It's not like packing a suitcase for a holiday. It means stepping away from a life built over generations. It means losing the familiar sound of the waves outside your window. It means your children growing up somewhere that doesn't smell like the sea you knew. For women, leaving also means losing their place in the web of community. Here, everyone knows who they are, whose daughter they are, who their grandmother was. That matters. That's belonging. In a new place, you're just another face. Mariam says she's scared of that. She says, if we go, who will we be there? Will we even still feel like us? Some of the younger women talk about leaving more openly. They say they want their children to grow up where they won't have to sweep floodwater out of the living room, where they won't have to taste salt in their drinking water, where they can sleep through a storm without listening for the sea. But the older generation holds tight. They built their lives here, brick by brick, tide by tide. Even the thought of leaving feels like betrayal, not just to the land, but to the people who came before. Heba's grandmother once said, "The sea may swallow my house, but it won't swallow my name." She's stubborn like that. The government talks about relocation plans. Meetings happen, reports get written, but for the people actually living here, relocation isn't just logistics, it's grief. Imagine leaving the tree where you played as a child, the corner where you first fell in love, the patch of sand where your father taught you to fish, and knowing the sea will wash over it after you go. That kind of goodbye isn't clean. It's heavy. It lingers. And yet, some people are quietly preparing. They save a little money. They talk to cousins on other islands. They keep documents safe in dry boxes, not because they've decided to go, but because they might not get to decide at all. Mariam admits that she started keeping her most precious things in a small bag near the door. Just in case. If the sea comes too fast, I want to carry something that proves I was here. And then there are those who say they'll never leave, no matter what. They look at the water like it's a stubborn friend, not an enemy. If the island goes down, I'm going down with it, one woman said. It's not bravado. It's love.
But love doesn't stop the tide. The truth is, nobody really knows how to prepare for losing a home that's more than just a place. They just live each day with that quiet weight, pretending not to feel it too much. Sometimes at night, the women talk softly on their porches. Someone mentions how many families have gone. Someone else counts how many houses are empty now. Someone laughs a little too quickly, like if they laugh, the truth won't sting so much. The sea keeps creeping closer. The talk of leaving grows louder. And everyone, deep down, knows that one day the choice may not be theirs anymore. Every islander has a story about the sea, how it fed them, scared them, comforted them. For generations, the ocean has been both a friend and a warning. But now, it feels more like a mirror, showing them what's being lost and what still survives. Heba stands on the edge of her yard, watching the waves crawl toward her feet. "When I was little," she says, "the water used to be over there." She points far beyond where the sea now reaches. Now it visits me every week. She says it lightly, but her face tells the real story, the tiredness, the quiet grief, and that tiny spark of defiance that refuses to go out. Mariam joins her, holding a cup of tea. They stand side by side, watching the horizon, sipping in silence. Around them, life hums along, kids laughing, roosters calling, someone hammering a roof plank somewhere. Life doesn't stop, even when the sea keeps coming. That's the strange beauty of these islands. They exist halfway between danger and determination. Every day feels like a balance between fear and faith, loss and love. The women here talk about the sea like it's a person, unpredictable, moody, but impossible to hate. Because how can you hate something that's always been part of your life? It's like hating the sky. But that doesn't make it easier. The rising tide has already stolen so much: land, gardens, homes, even pieces of history. And what it's threatening now is something harder to measure: the future. When you ask the girls growing up here what they dream of, their answers are different from their mothers. They still talk about family and school, but also about safety, about dry land, about wanting a future that doesn't depend on the tide schedule. Some want to leave. Others want to stay and fight for the island. All of them want to be heard. One of the teenage girls, Aisha, said something that stuck with me. "People think we're disappearing, but we're not. We're adapting." That word, adapting, has become a kind of anthem here. It's what the women do best. They adapt. They rebuild. They keep loving a place that keeps challenging them. And through it all, they laugh. Not because it's funny, but because laughter is lighter than fear. You can carry it further. At night, when the sea hums softly against the rocks, you can hear voices drifting through the dark, women chatting, joking, singing lullabies to their children. The same songs their mother sang. Songs about hope, about staying strong, about tomorrow. That's how they fight back, not with anger, but with rhythm, with care, with the stubborn act of living fully in a place the world says is dying. Mariam once said, "The sea wants us gone, but we're still here." And that's the truth at the heart of all this. They are still here, still sweeping porches that might flood again tomorrow, still planting flowers in salty soil, still hanging laundry in the sun, like a small act of rebellion against the waves. Because for them, survival isn't just about walls and sandbags. It's about identity. It's about refusing to let the sea take the meaning of who they are. The Maldives may one day lose land, but the women of these islands have made something that can't be drowned. A kind of memory that lives in stories, in songs, in voices that refuse to go quiet. One day, the ocean might rise higher than anyone can fight. The islands might shrink until the maps erase them. But even then, the world will still remember the women who laughed at the tide, who built new lives out of wet sand and courage, who faced a drowning world and said, "Not yet."